we have a guy who's been in pinball for over 50 years. I've been in pinball for over 50 years, but I just, playing early and operated for a while. And I guess when you started playing pretty soon, you were playing as a entry into game development, right? To
Right.
learn how to exercise those games that Ted Zale was designing.
Yeah, I basically, I'm Jim Patla, just to make an introduction here. And I started at Bally. I started at Bally in 1965, and I was a sophomore in high school. And 3 hours a day after school, I'd go play pinball at Bally and get paid for it. So it was a rough life. Things were obviously different there. Electromechanical games, record keeping was pen and paper. So when we played the games, we wrote down the scores, how many specials, how many extra balls, how long the gameplay was. And Ted Zale was the drill sergeant, and he made sure everything was exactly the way he wanted it. So the 3-ball game was 1.5 minutes, and the 5-ball game was 2.5 minutes, and that was it. And so it was a real learning experience. I think that I'm really proud of Bally as a company, because when you look back at that company, there's a lot of people who are still in the industry that got their education there. And we had quality control programs in place then, that people are lean manufacturing and so forth. They were doing it in the 60s. And people are still trying to do it now. And that was just their culture, because anybody could have an idea. Anybody was allowed to go into the president's office and say, I have an idea, I think we should do this. And everybody got a chance once. If your idea was good, then you got more chances. But everybody got a chance to fail once, and that was just the way they were. Because nobody has a magic measuring stick for what is going to be fun. Everybody has an idea of what fun is. Everybody has an idea of, I'd say people have more of an opinion of what they don't like than what they do like. And so it was always his philosophy that he would give anybody a chance. And I think that created a team in that company that lived on for a very long time. So anyhow, that's just my sentimental portion of me.
And I know we have a lot of interest in the 60s, the 70s, the era when you were a designer, but to make sure we have enough background for people, I did want to ask a little bit about, you got out of design around 1981, you would do a couple rush projects and stuff, but then you were doing some important work like standardizing, right, and getting even better engineering practices than already existed?
My last game was Centaur.
Yeah.
Which, that was the last game. And we were going through the whole industry was transitioning to video at the time. Pac-Man basically killed the interest in pinball. I mean, it was just ridiculous, what we were doing on the line as far as manufacturing them. At almost 24/7, the line was running. Around 82, they merged the pinball group with Midway Manufacturing, so they moved it to the other building. And the other people that were working in that facility went over to gaming, because Bally was starting to get heavier into the slot machine, the new slot machines. Bally had always been in slot machines, but the new electronic slot machines was something they were focusing on. And there was the shortly after that, then there was the Bally Life Fitness. They got into the fitness equipment. But so I was out of pinball around when we moved over to Midway.
Mhm.
They downsized the pinball department, and then they put me on special projects. And I worked with Hank Ross to do, like a gun. He always wanted a gun. He was the gun
Midway
game.
co-founder
He
Hank
was
Ross.
he was the gun game guy, and so he wanted a new, modernized shooting game, and I never did a gun game before. I mean, I guess, where's Steve Ritchie? I gotta wait for him, huh?
Not here yet.
Yeah, I gotta wait. I'll wait for him for this portion to start. There's another game that gave me a little insight on how to do the gun game. The gun game is called Midnight Marauders, and what I
Yeah.
did is I put photo cells up in a artwork piece that detected the beam from the gun. Well, we didn't have infrared. Like now, you can use your phone to detect infrared. So to try to figure out the beam for the gun, went in a completely dark room. We taped up on, we got as much visible light out of the gun that we could, so we could see what we were doing. We did a reflective mirror, and it looked like a 50-inch monitor. And we had people from Japan sticking their head in the game going, "Where did you get a monitor this big?" Because they didn't realize it was nothing more than fancy artwork. And that was,
So that was visible light that.
it wasn't visible light. No, that was the illumination. That was, we backlit the artwork. The visible light, that was only for us to figure out how to collimate the beam. And it was the best way we could figure out how to collimate the beam, so for accuracy. But anyhow, now that Steve's here, I can talk
Yeah,
about
okay.
it.
I have to be here to hear you.
I know.
So this
And I was saying, the video game that, the
Midnight Marauders.
Midnight Marauders, a shooting game, it was artwork with backward artwork, very similar to the artwork in Rapid Fire.
Okay.
Which, I don't know if you ever heard of that game before.
I've heard of it. I don't think I ever played it.
Really?
No.
Yeah.
I don't know though. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
It
Yeah.
wasn't a pinball machine, right?
Well, I heard that Williams,
Well, if it
I
was-
heard Williams copied it and made Hyperball.
No, that's not what happened.
I heard it was called Project Destruction.
Oh man.
Well, that's why he's here. That's why.
That's not why.
That's why he's here. So we can talk about that later. But yes, that was that's a whole story unto itself. That's quite humorous. So
Okay, but
Anyhow.
you were during the mid '80s. You had work to do to
Right.
engineering work and.
Well, then I went back into pinball in '86. We did the TNT, the Next Trend, and that's when we came up in the last presentation. You saw the different display that we came up with, and that was to do alphanumerics as cheaply as possible. And so 86 to 88 is
Yeah.
when
All right. So this is like Special Force and Strange Science.
hard body, strange,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay. And they say the
Heavy-
next trend on the flyer.
yeah. And so that was we were trying to redesign the games to put as much into them as possible, but reduce the cost. And some of the ideas worked very well. Other ideas, not so much, because we did a cabinet that was tapered. And the reason that it was tapered is so we could get more games in a container when we shipped them overseas. Well, we had two different legs. We had longer legs for the back and shorter legs for the front. And that wasn't the worst part, but the worst part was a pinball carrier didn't work anymore. So you couldn't move them.
Like a '60s Williams with a drop front. Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't move them.
How
So
many games had that feature?
How many games had that?
we probably only did that maybe on the first or second, maybe two. Yeah. We went back to normal cabinet again.
Yeah.
but I think we could get, I think it was ridiculous how many more games we got in the container. It was a lot.
That's a cool thing.
Okay,
So-
well, so I'm drawing this out to get a sense of what was on your plate of things to do at that time, and you were still there when the whole Midway games got transferred.
I became director of engineering in '86. I was there until August of '88 when Williams bought the Bally Pinball division.
Right, which was like they shuffled business
Right,
units around
right.
to
And-
have
and-
what they wanted
and
to sell off. And
We
you transferred.
we were having a global launch of the latest game that we were having there, and in Venice. And I remember talking to the president of the company and saying, you know, something doesn't feel right here. You know, it doesn't feel right. I want to know if I should go and spend 3 months in Italy, or do I just go for the, you know, time we're going. He goes, what are you talking about? And I said, okay, tell me you don't know. And so my wife has his family there, so after the show in Venice, we went and visited her family. We were there for 3 weeks. Get back on the airplane to come back to the States, and the first thing I see is a little mini headline on the front page of the paper. I said, can I have a drink? Can I have another drink? My wife's sitting on the other side. What's going on? Nothing. And right there in the headline, Bally sells pinball division. It's like, okay. So that was another interesting surprise. And then Steve and I got to work together because,
Wasn't bad. I don't have bad memories. Do you?
no.
Not at all. I just remember this. I don't want to horn in, but I'm involved in your. I don't have to be. I could leave, but I just want to share this because I have a lot of stuff I don't remember.
Want to sit up here?
No,
Oh, okay.
it's yours. It's your thing. But I'm thinking one of the dumb things that they wanted to do was make Bally games be their own Bally games. They couldn't use any components from Williams, and Williams would make games in the same building with Williams components. And it was a dumb idea, just super dumb. We didn't end up doing it, but it took conversation to get it out of Neil's mind.
It was, and to that point, it would have been Truck Stop.
Right, this, you get a partial credit on truck
It
stop.
would be Truck Stop, and they had jumper wires between the stand-up targets for common, and the wire was breaking. And I go look into it, and they're using solid wire as jumpers. And on the spool of wire, it's, you know, here it is, this big spool of wire, do not use in environments with a vibration. It's like, okay, so I go see the guy, Ernie, go see him on the line, what's going on? This is what we always use. Not anymore. They changed it on the Bally games, and they kept using it on the Williams. And then Williams started having the problem. And Ken Podesna called me into the, how come you didn't change it on the Williams games? And I go, I tried.
I really don't remember anything like that. I probably didn't have a game on the line.
You probably didn't have a game on the line, right?
In my office.
But this is the kind of thing that you were trying to do, is get engineering
Well, like
improvements.
Steve says, we worked together, but there was this, and I think some of it was Steve Kordak, not so much.
Yeah.
He had, you know, he was Mr. Williams, and he just wanted to keep his arms around and keep Williams as pure as possible. And you could see there were some of the things that were changing that he didn't necessarily. He didn't necessarily resist change, but you could just see he wanted to keep some things the way that he remembered them.
Yeah.
And I think you can appreciate that. So.
Well, now, for example, I think one of your big accomplishments is that you brought in AutoCAD.
Yes. Yeah.
So you started out hand drawing.
We
and
actually
you
had,
switched-
we actually started CAD. It wasn't actually it wasn't AutoCAD, but we started CAD at Bally before we moved over. And then when we got to Williams, we started with 2 stations from digital computers.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't like today where, you know, everything's more or less standardized and standard components. These were all specialized.
This is like the VAX station or something
Yeah,
like that?
yeah. So, yeah,
we got New
two-
Englanders here, so they might know the VAX computers.
We got two of them, and that was the beginning of starting to transition into digital drawings.
That was a great thing. The first game I did digitally was Next Generation.
Yeah.
I didn't really know that you brought AutoCAD there, so I am grateful.
You're-
I'm still using it now.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, and we did the document control system, where we, because in this isn't, I wouldn't say this would be unique to any one company, but when you would look at the bill of material and you'd be looking for a ball guide wide, just a simple, silly ball guide, and it's 1 1/4 inches long. If you paid attention to the stock room, you'd see, oh, there's a 1 1/4 inch ball guide, part number 5. Oh, there's a 1 1/4 inch ball guide, part number 10. And because somebody didn't take the time to find out that it had already been designed, and it was just easier to design it again, put a new part number on it, and so we'd have same part under multiple part numbers. So the program was to convert as many drawings as possible, identify as many drawings as possible, and reduce the amount of redundancy. So, yeah.
I was just thinking about, there's a lot of parts that we made, like gates and switches, like roll unders.
Mm-hmm.
You can't find them to get,
Right.
you just end up making your original part pretty much because, some you could grab that would be standard, but not many, not often.
But
You
only-
needed all those different sizes of gates, and they're probably all there and already done, but you
Right.
can't find them.
Right. But then with the new system, you could, search.
Yep.
Right.
You could search, and all of a sudden, there they are. Now it's still up to you to find out if it fits. But at least you had an idea of where they were at.
So full text search is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Well, it's the thing is, and again, I'll go back to Bally. It was a paper and pen system, and there was the engineering filings, and Marge was in charge, and Marge would cut off your hands if you went into those drawers, because nobody was allowed to go into those drawers, and she was the one that issued all the part numbers, and you had to give her your drawing, and she would analyze the drawing to figure out what part number, because she didn't want duplications. And she'd look at the drawing, she'd go back to the system. She was our sort. She was our sort person, and she would go through and say, "Here, we already have this," and she'd send you on your way. So it was a very disciplined company.
There was
Well,
nobody at
yeah.
Williams doing that.
Yeah, no, Marge was amazing.
There was Elaine,
Yeah.
Elaine Johnson, who memorized every part we had. She was amazing.
Yeah, human computer. Her and John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take that and let's
Okay.
drop back 2 decades.
Okay.
So you're coming in, and what I've learned from Greg Kmick, your colleague there, working from high school and college, same as you.
I got him the job.
Yeah. And he was talking to me, giving me some information about the designers would do their drawing of or some other way of laying out the play field, and somewhere on the way to production, it had to go to engineering, production engineering, or some team that was reviewing everything to try to standardize it.
Sort of. Well, we had our own R&D department, is our Whitewood department,
Yeah.
and we had an engineer. His name was Irv Grable, and he was the guy who would do the new one-of-a-kind mechanisms. And he had a can-do attitude. He never said it couldn't be done. It just, he might tell you he doesn't know how to do it right now, but he'll figure it out. So he would do the mechs like he did. He did the mech on, Silver Ball Mania, and the one between the
Between the
flippers.
flippers,
And
yeah.
he was obsessed. He wanted to do it with a coil. He didn't want to do a motorized lift because that was too expensive. And he was all hell bent that he was going to do it with a coil. And it took him a long time, but he finally figured it out. So with that being said, that mechanism, the Centaur mechanisms, or any mechanism that was, the inline drop target, he would make a one of a kind. And he'd go in the machine shop, he'd mill out a part, he did everything himself. He made the whole thing himself. To Greg's point, then it's like you take all this and throw it over the wall to engineering. So now engineering would take it and do the official engineering drawings, and they would refine it. In other words, they would look at the design, and they never had anything bad to say about it, but it would be like, well, we got to change this and this for production, make it a little easier for production here. And so they would take his designs and make them more designed for manufacturing.
Yeah.
Lean manufacturing.
Right. I was asking him in particular. Harry Williams did a couple mail-in designs, like
Yeah.
Firecracker, and those certainly must have been Bally-ized.
Some of those were the hardest designs because as a designer, when you have a vision, you have a starting point in your head and you know where you want to go. When somebody, and that's with a blank piece of paper, when somebody gives you something, they say, I want this, and you look at it and go, oh, really? How am I going to do that? And it's I think part of it is you don't have your heart and soul in it, so it becomes more of a problem-solving endeavor than a
Creative. Yeah.
endeavor.
Yeah. Now, another thing I heard from Greg, if you look back here, we have a magnetic board, and
Yes.
we have some sheet magnets.
Yes.
And I heard from Greg that Ted Zale used that system
Mhm.
for some of his playfield layouts. Did you see him do that? Can you describe?
Yes, I can.
Did he have the three bumpers always in a triangle like one magnet, and they were always of the exact same
Oh,
triangle?
you're talking about that. Oh. I thought you were going to be talking about something else.
Does he throw magnets on a magnetic board? And
He did. But I thought you were going to go down a different path, and maybe Ted Zale was always thinking outside the box, and his designs, back in the early games were always symmetrical. Ted's games were not.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So he was always looking for something new. Well, like on a ball guide, he wanted to do an anti-gravity ball guide. So what he did is he put that magnetic material on the ball guide. So now it would go up again, it wouldn't fall off at the end of the lip.
Huh.
So, yeah. That's where I thought you were going with that, but yeah.
Yeah. So according to Greg, he would actually try to get very precise down to the 64th of an inch on the magnet board, and
He
then
had grids. Yeah, it was all gridded out, yeah.
and this then would eventually become hand drawn on paper,
Yep.
going into that file cabinet that Marge protected, and
Mm-hmm. Smoking probably 1 or 2 packs of cigarettes a day while he did it, yes.
What year was that? Years.
60, well, he started, I think Ted started in 62, 63.
yeah, 62.
Yeah.
For the first pinball, 63 was their pinball comeback, so he would have been working on that in 62.
Yeah.
His designs definitely influenced me. There's no question. He was something interesting about everything
Yeah.
he did. He was a groundbreaker.
He was a very interesting person. Yeah.
Do you have any stories you could tell about?
No, I mean, again, it goes back to the whole culture. You go in his car, and his wife was very short, so he made a platform for her section of the cars so that it was higher so she could rest her feet. I mean, everything about him was, he adapted whatever he could, everything in his whole, I mean, not only in his car, but his office and everything else. Everything was just customized.
Let's get slide 3 from Jim Steck and get that ready for talk about Four Queens. So, to what extent was Ted mentoring you, and was he trying to tell you the game is too symmetrical or anything like that?
Actually, I don't remember. It was just one of those things where, you know, it's a very safe, basic design for the time.
Okay, let's get that on screen there, and
That was very typical, very typical of the time.
and this game is in the game room, beautifully restored by Brian Hawkins, our vendor hall manager. So you can play that game. I operated that game. I realized that because the center hole has 5 different values, and then there's also an alternator, and they're both driven off the match number unit, that somebody could track the match number during the course of play of the game, and you eventually were told that, I guess.
We didn't, well, I mean, they tried to randomize as much as they could by interjecting positions in the score motor or whatever, but obviously much more predictable.
Yeah. But how did that feel at that time? This was like your step up out of being the helper.
Well, I started playing the games. Then after that playing the games, I disassembled, because we saved every component off the whitewoods and reused them and reused them and reused them. We didn't just, and that's why there's no whitewoods from that era, because they were all disassembled and components were repurposed. So I went from taking them apart to building them to wiring them to doing schematics, because that was all electromechanical, and then finally got a chance to do a design. So.
Did you ever have any trouble of hitting the bomb and still wanting more features in it and having to take things out?
I mean, there was no flexibility in the cost of the game. They had a number, and we weren't allowed to go over it. I mean, there was no plead your case. For the most part, it took an act of God, something really special, to get something to move on that portion of the game. So at that, you're looking at, that's 1970, 71, through 75. It was solid. I mean, things didn't change now. I went to Europe in 71, 72. They sent Ted Zale over there, and then they sent me over there, and we met with all the distributors to come up with their wish list, because Gottlieb was number 1. They were the big gorilla, and Bally really wanted to take over. So they started by sending Ted there. Ted and I couldn't talk. We weren't allowed to talk. And then they sent me there, and then when we got back, we filed separate reports. And then after the reports were finally digested, then they combined them and came up with, these are the first 10 things we're going to fix, these are the next 10 things. And it was as simple as, they hated our ball plunger. They hated our ball plunger. Get rid of that. Get the Gottlieb one is beautiful. You got, get rid of this, get rid of that. I mean, now to us, you didn't see that much difference, but they wanted certain things changed, and they made those concessions.
So maybe we could go to high-low ace, something like that seemed to me, and I had some of your games on my route, not just Four Queens, but high-low ace certainly seems like a very Gottlieb-ish kind of layout.
They
to
want,
it.
well, it's a card game, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
and you had the
yeah.
the feeder lanes,
Yeah.
the in lanes.
I mean, it was, we made multiplayer games, 4-player games were made for Germany. 1-player games were made for Italy.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it was.
Let's pull up his slide 9, Circus. You can 73. So that's probably another one that was. So, yeah, another one that seemed to me more symmetrical and more. Oh, and I operated Monte Carlo. It's fun. There's Circus.
Yep.
You can see very classic
Hated
bottom
that.
that
Hated
Italians.
that artwork.
Yeah. The Dick White artwork.
I hated that artwork.
But the one active bumper kind of in a corral with 2 passive bumpers beside it, so a lot of bumping around there,
Yeah, it was.
which could have been a Gottlieb idea or a Chicago coin idea for that
No,
matter.
it was, when you're starting out, at least for me, you look and see what you like or what you don't like, and you want to grow upon that. And so you take a feature and you expand and expand and expand. I mean, I think it was just a learning experience.
But that game Circus had some of the from your Italian trip.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then there was Champ.
Champ.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's slide number 11. So step ahead a couple.
Or Flicker would be, yeah.
Yeah. Champ. Wow, that's symmetrical.
Yes, it is.
And that Sky Kings is very similar to
Right.
that.
It's the 1-player version.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, see, now you're testing me. There's 40 different games, but I think the 40 different games boil down to 30 different designs.
Yeah. Like
Because-
so Circus had Big Show
Right.
and Monte Carlo had odds and evens. And this is a good time to bring up test marketing, I think. So I saw odds and evens in a test location 1 full year before I could order it. Seems like an awful long lead time. Do you remember anything? Were you reworking it, rethinking what to do with that, or
No.
just other games had priority, maybe?
No. Now I get to test your memory.
Okay.
Was there anything unusual about that odds and even game?
That have trip relays in it?
No, we were playing around with different playfield materials.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't
Yeah,
see
we were-
that in the
we were playing
production
around
ones.
with expandable foam playfields. So they were fantastic in the sense that the artwork adhered to them and lasted forever, never deteriorated. But what was bad, and this again, learning from mistakes, without UV inhibitors, all what would be the bare wood areas would turn dark green. And it wasn't very appealing.
yeah.
And then
Not what people
they
were
also
expecting
got
for
brittle.
pinball.
They got brittle, and sections would break off.
Well, there's your planned obsolescence, I guess. So one of the things that I like best about Bally in that era is that, like your game 4, there were games that could fail even at that test stage. That it was a real test, it was not just for show, and at that same time, Gottlieb did pro football, which looked like a dog when I saw the test piece, turned out to be a dog. Luckily, because I saw the test piece, I didn't buy it. And 4, I'm not so sure that would have looked like a dog to me. I own one now,
Yeah.
the one that was at Hampton Beach in New Hampshire. But I think the way the rules were presented was a little hard to follow. I mean, you're trying to make it look more like a golf game than just put out all 10 lights.
Right.
now that I've looked through the schematic over and over again, I see what you were going for. So I hope you don't feel like it's a total failure. You get to fail.
It was, if I remember, it was another group project.
Mhm.
You know, because there were certain
The art certainly was.
and there were certain people who really, really liked golf and really wanted a golf game. So you're going to do a golf game, okay? And so that's kind of where that came from. So.
Yeah, but I mean, some of the other ones that failed, Joker and Red Max and like that,
Yeah.
you could
Can't
say,
even find a Red Max.
yeah, these are games that quantities of 70 and 80 and 55 in a couple of cases for the test pieces. And some you can say, yeah, that is boring. I can't wait for this game to be over so I could walk down to the next one at the pinball show or something. But I give a lot of credit to Bally for doing that. And what I found out, so the distributor here was Bally Northeast, so a company-owned distributorship. And Arnold Kamenkow was running it, Joe's father. And he put me in touch with some people at the factory. They were like, you know, he was a financial guy, so he put me in touch with the financial people, with the ones he knew. And I found out that the test marketing, there was a lot of leverage given to the airport in New Orleans. And
Louis Boldberg.
Louis Boasberg of New Orleans Novelty. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that location, that made Fireball seem like a real hit.
Arcade,
Yeah. It's,
the name of it.
it did really well. It'd be the kind of game that the first week, $60. Second week, $45. Third week, $30. Fourth week, time to rotate it. And that's a pretty frequent rotation schedule. You don't really want that, but it was because at an airport, of course,
Right.
you're going to get so many people going through who've never seen the game, and they're going to think it's really dazzling and has that funny
Well, I
spinning
think
rubber tread.
I think Fireball took off after it was in the magazine. That's
Oh,
when
in the Playboy
in
magazine,
the Playboy
December
magazine.
'72.
Yeah. That's when it got the shot in the arm.
Mhm. So that was developed without any extra cost, and that was
Right.
within the cost
Yeah.
guidelines. Because it seems like quite a bit to cut that field and have that bend in it. and,
But you're
spinning rubber.
utilizing the same, I mean, it's just extra work. It isn't necessarily extra material or
Yeah.
really.
That was risky though. It's like, pulling up a piece of wood. I wouldn't do that today.
But we did it.
I know.
And we never had,
It worked,
and it worked.
It works, but it's like, maybe the wood was better, I don't know. I think it might have been, and the hard coat, we could use really harsh, nasty chemicals that we can't use today. I'm not gonna speak about that anymore, but, it was a
Too many
big
chemicals.
influence. Fireball was a big
Fireball.
influence,
Yeah.
on us, definitely. When I say us, I'm talking Eugene Jarvis and me at Atari, well after you.
I mean, it was
You
nice.
have a longer history than me.
I mean, the colors were spectacular.
Yeah, what the game did was
Yeah.
awesome. Multi-ball.
Yeah, well, let's talk about art then, because in addition to games being thrown over the wall to engineering for production, I understand that in the Zale era at least, and probably for some of your games, the art, you were not designing knowing what the art was? Is that the
No,
case?
We
Like Four Queens, did you know that was?
no that would because it was a card game, but
You knew it was
more
gonna
than
be a
that,
card
you
game,
knew
yeah.
it was going to be a card game. You would be, we want to make we want to make Cowboys and Indians. We want to make a road rally game. We want to, there would be certain themes that they would request. We didn't. We didn't start off with designs because you have to. I probably did, not just me, but 4 games a year.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was just bam, 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 get it over, give it to somebody else, let them worry about it, let them worry about it.
Yeah, let's go to his slide 16 for Twin Win. I mean, clearly that's got the little racetrack
Right.
on the playfield,
Right.
so you had to know it
exactly.
was a racing game.
That's my point. It was going to be a racing game.
And you get Dave Christensen, and we seem to have two versions of the backlash there.
Mhm. Yes, we do.
Dave Christensen testing the boundaries.
No, actually, I did that.
Oh, okay. Tell us what you did. Come on, Jim. What did you do?
We used to do our photo shoots in the engineering department,
For the flyer.
For the
and
flyer.
Promo photos.
and so I knew that there was going to be a shoot the next day. It was scheduled, so I was staying late, and I took a back glass and I started scraping off the art from the back. Christensen came in, caught me doing it, and what are you doing? And he grabbed it from me and took it away, and he brought it back a few hours later, all done. And so the next day at the photo shoot, Herb Jones was a Yale grad. He was in charge of promotions and marketing and all things good. He comes in. You guys have gone too far, and he ran off. I quickly took that glass out, put the other one back in. I get a call from the front office. Jim, you almost killed him. I go, I don't know what you're talking about. I go, you almost killed him. I go, I don't know what you're talking about. He goes, bring it to my office. I want to see it. So that's how that came about.
But that you had Christian Marsh, and then this guy Dave Christensen, Mad Dog, comes
Yeah.
along, and so 4 actually. That's the team thing. Might have been Dick
Right.
White doing the golf bag,
Right.
but Christensen did the girls,
Yeah.
and it was said that Bob Tim did the backlash, but then later someone showed it to Bob Tim, and he said, "No, I didn't do that." So we
Right.
don't know who did that
Right.
backlash.
That was a very strange development. The whole art thing was just bizarre at that time. I mean, the artwork because they did artwork for slot machines, that was fine because that was pretty much straightforward. There wasn't a lot of personality in the slot machines per se. It was
Yeah.
mostly mechanical stuff.
And the bingos, you had very
Right.
little space.
So
to-
then, Paul Ferris came on, and then, Paul brought in, Greg and Margaret and Kevin, and things finally got pulled together in the right direction.
yeah. So, do you remember which of the games was the first one where you were conscious of what the art was going to be during the design cycle?
Well, Tom Neiman basically
Oh yeah, we got to talk about Tom
he,
Neiman.
he,
sure.
he pioneered promotions and
And the licensed
licensing
themes and all that, yeah.
licensing. Well, it's a very loose. Yes, they were licenses, but they didn't cost anything because pinball was so popular. He could talk somebody into it. We'll give you a couple games. Okay, So when we'll put you on the back glass, we'll make you famous. So, yeah, Tom worked that angle very, very well. Well, again, this would be about 19. Wizard was the first
75,
one.
yeah.
75. So it was right around 75. I had Playboy in development, which was a Whitewood. It wasn't Playboy. And I had another game which was called Light Align in development. I forget what I called Playboy. And Light Align was a 5x5 matrix instead of a 4x4 that KISS had.
Yeah.
And they came in and said, "How would you like your game to be KISS?" Well, okay. You got to take out one row and one column. Okay. So then it was, figure out where it had to change so that it could be a 4x4 instead of 5x5. And that's how that playfield became KISS. Now, I don't remember what I had to do to modify Playboy, but I do remember that was when we put in the music on the chime box for the Playboy theme.
Right.
And talk about people who didn't want to see change. It was ridiculous how people, we are not making jukeboxes, we make pinball machines. And it was like, that was a hard sell. That was a hard sell getting that, into the game.
And you weren't even paying royalties on that music.
No.
Right? They just,
He was.
I would think Hefner would be very happy to.
Exactly.
He was always trying to reuse that theme,
Yep.
from what I can tell. So you saw the whole change in art from
Absolutely.
sending things off to
Absolutely.
whatever Christian
I
Marsh
mean,
wanted to do.
when Ad Posters was doing artwork for the games, George Malenta would bring in like 3 different playfields. This one is based on different blues and contrast, and this one's in the red family, and this is, and he'd have the back glasses, and he'd have this back glass goes with this, and this goes, and you'd see management go, no, we want this back glass with this playfield, and they would just mix them up, and okay, you could see he was in a business to make money, but you could see it
Yeah.
also broke his heart.
Yeah.
So.
Get ready for questions. Start walking up to the microphone there if you have questions. Favorite game that you designed?
Centaur.
Centaur. Easy question.
Matahari would be probably also, it's up there. That one was called Bank Shot.
Yeah, that's certainly understandable.
Yeah.
You can play it in the room. There's 2 Mataharis in the room there.
That was another one that took time to figure out, because like if you shot the lowest drop target on the left-hand side, you would hit the lowest target on the right-hand side with the same shot. And that was intentional.
Yep.
So,
Okay. That's slide 18 if you want to jump ahead a couple there and see Matahari. But you can play it for yourself. Okay. We have a Ted Zale expert at the microphone here.
okay.
Uh-oh.
Steve.
That's a big intro, Dave. So I had a long list of questions, and as Dave was talking with you, I was taking them off my list, one by one by one. But I do have a question about the production lines in your early days at Bally. Ted Zale and team were turning out, on average, a game every 6 weeks. And nowadays, manufacturers turn out 3 a year, and they think that's a big deal. How did you do so many games at one time, and how many lines were there working simultaneously?
Oh, you have to remember the runs were shorter. So I mean, depending on what period of time you're talking about, I mean, a 5,000 run was huge. But I mean, typically they were, 500, 1,200. If it was 1,000, maybe 2,000. 2,000 was probably there was probably a number of 2,000s.
Yeah. Well, Bizarre 29-25, so that must have been a cause for celebration.
See, I think that if you look at, wow, I'm trying to remember what year this was. It's when
Well, a breakthrough game was Capersville in 1966.
That's
That
not
was,
what I'm talking about,
But,
though.
okay.
We got up to 500 games a day in manufacturing. 500 games a day. We were running games on Belmont Avenue. We were running games out in Franklin Park, and we were building games in Ireland. So, I mean, that's when you got to scratch your head and say what's going on. And that was probably 77, somewhere around 77, 78. Yeah.
Thank
you have only one question? I can't
you.
believe it.
You decimated my list as you were talking.
Great.
That's all that was left.
Happy to do it. Okay, another question coming up. Go ahead.
Hi, Jim.
I-
Is around managing ego during the Bally Midway merger.
Okay.
You've got one team coming in from Bally Midway and then the other team at Williams. How did you because everybody's got to be looking over their shoulder, right, as to who's out the door,
Yeah,
who's
I mean,
sticking around.
as much as people wanted to work together, because you have to understand, we all knew each other. I mean, Steve and I were on a design cycle where our games, more often than not, would end up in the field testing against each other. So, I mean, did we hate each other? No. Did we, I think there was a mutual respect. And, so I think that when we came over, I think that the most difficult part wasn't the egos per se, but you take a 3-bedroom house and you move 20 people into it. And that's kind of what it was. All of a sudden, everybody's workspace became smaller and everybody became, it just became awkward because it wasn't, everybody had to make sacrifices. And I think Williams felt that, they shouldn't have had to because we were here, but why do we have to have a smaller office now?
People had mentioned that there was like competition to get time in the machine shop, or competition
But that's always even two designers, in the same company would kill each other to get. I mean, take a guy to lunch, give him a case of beer. I mean, a case of beer went a long way in the machine shop. You got your parts first, so I mean, you wouldn't know about that, would you, Steve?
Well, yes, I would.
So no, I mean that had nothing to do with Bally versus Williams. This was just, every designer's always they're very competitive. So.
Well, I would think for the Bally guys, it probably felt good to be more wanted by your corporate parent.
It was a very awkward. The whole transition was awkward because some people were given severance packages, and other people were told no, and you can't quit either. You have to go.
You're part of what they're
You have to
buying.
go.
Can you mention some names?
No.
Why?
Why?
You can't quit. That's weird.
Yeah, me. I couldn't. I had to go. I either had to quit or.
Greg Kamick quit, didn't he?
No, he got laid off.
Okay.
No.
Trying to remember.
No, they weeded out. I mean, again, Williams only wanted so much.
I'm kind of sorry to hear that that's how you felt about it, because I didn't, I got along with you, I got along with Greg, Pat, everybody pretty much.
Well, we did.
Yeah.
No, I don't. We didn't have any animosity towards Williams. It was just the way Neil and company and everybody handled
You just
it.
have to learn to ignore Neil.
So no, it was just that was the awkward part. The awkward part was just the way they did it. Not the people, not the people within the company, but the way the merger happened.
I think Williams really wanted to beat down Bally.
Yeah.
All right, any more questions? More questions? Oh, okay. If you're coming down the line here. And you are officially retired now, right?
I'm
You're
officially
not
retired.
looking to
No.
be COO of any other pinball
No.
companies? Okay, so we get that out of the way.
Hello, thank you. Centaur is one of my favorite games, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm also very partial to games from the EM solid state transition. and I know your games kind of straddle, a lot of your games straddled that line. Blackjack, Matahari,
Yeah, your game Flicker got to be the prototype for the solid state system.
Bow and arrow.
question is, as a designer, did you factor into that transition, or was that strictly engineering? Share about those titles time.
No, what you have to understand is that, again, it's all about economics, and you can't have a memory feature, electromechanically speaking. Like, one-player games had features that a four-player game couldn't have because you only had one set of logic for the one-player game, and you couldn't afford to put in 4 times as many relays to keep track of all those different features. So yeah, when we knew the electronics was coming, yeah, that was like, woohoo! Now we get to do, you can do, equitable multi, because you can remember what you're doing instead of you do all the work and the next player takes it away and steals it from you, and it's like,
Like Fireball, where you could steal the other guy's locks.
Yeah. So you mentioned Blackjack. I think the game, what was the other one? Little Joe, which was
Well, Little Joe was your earlier, the dice theme
the
game.
dice game. That was done with, again, this was Irv Grable, the guy who was the mad professor. He came up with a resistor ladder logic. So because we couldn't afford all the different relays for all the different combinations, and he was able to figure out a circuit where it was just one relay, and it was like, okay. So that, everybody was starting to think towards the features that could be utilized during the electronic era. So yeah, it was, I think that we were all very excited to know that was coming.
Okay. This is the guy that did the Four Queens restoration.
Yeah.
That some of the designers didn't embrace change so much, like Nick was wondering, they're excited about the new features that digital would offer.
I think so. I think that, I don't know of anybody who saw electronics as a barrier. I don't know of anybody that viewed it, not from a designer perspective. I think some individuals in certain companies felt that it was just going to be short-lived. It would never work. And let's go back to ding, 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 and let's live that life forever. And I guess movies still live that life forever, no matter what game's on the screen. But no, I think that it's a toolbox. It's just one more tool in the toolbox, and it makes it easier to accomplish things.
Another question I had is, in the era of the EM, the designers now, they focus mainly on the geometry of the playfield and ball flow and that kind of thing, and there's separate teams that do the software and animations for the screen and stuff. In the EM area, did the designer get into the electronics and the design of the rules or contribute to the art so much, or is it pretty much they just do the physical layout?
Not all designers could do relay logic. Some could and some couldn't. So we had people who were assigned those tasks, but you had, again, you had to wait in line. So and so is doing the schematic for your game, and you had to wait. Well, if you didn't want to wait, you did it yourself. Not everybody could do it themselves. So that's why some designers had advantages in that respect.
Well, for some of your first few games, were you were you drawing out, there's a whole schematic and working out all the interactions of all the relays, or doing, okay.
Yeah, at some point, I don't remember at what point, but yeah, I mean, I remember, again, was a hell project. It was a game sent in by Ted Zale. He was out in Mountain Home, Arkansas, and he was going to fly in and review the game with management. And the game had to be running by whatever,
Yeah,
pick some unrealistic tomorrow.
okay.
No, I mean, it's what it was. And so I stayed that night to wire the game. So I literally realized, very quickly that there was no way I could cut a green wire for this and a blue wire for that. I just couldn't do it. So I just grabbed one spool of wire and I just wired the whole game with one color wire. It worked. But then they wanted to make changes to the rules. I got swore at a lot. But it was just one of those things. It was just like either you wanted the game for tomorrow or not. There was no way to do it. And I basically stayed all night just to finish it.
Let's throw in another name before we go back to the questions. Al Gregg was a manager or director of design or something like that after Ted Zale. You remember anything about him that you want to tell us?
I remember it being very awkward the first time I met him at Bally, because he was in charge of a different company called Games Incorporated. He was in charge. He was in charge of manufacturing over there, and they were building a game for Bally, and it wasn't working. And
some arcade type game, I guess.
It was the pitch and bat. It was a mechanical baseball game, and so it was summertime. So I was assigned to go over and troubleshoot all the games on the line for them. Well, I was 17 years old. It didn't go over very well because I'm showing them all the mistakes they made.
Yeah.
So that was the first time I met Al Gregg. And then a number of years later, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, Ted Zale's retiring. Here's your new boss.
Hopefully you know how to troubleshoot a game now.
Yeah, if you look up online, Games Incorporated made some pretty crazy. I think they did the ski and score, some outlandish ideas.
Well, what it was is, again, I was part-time, so I didn't get vacation.
Yeah.
And so I was working. And it wasn't just Bally. I think the whole industry would shut down for the first 2-3 weeks of July. All the companies went on vacation at the same time. Well, since I wasn't entitled to it, I was still there doing whatever they left behind for me to do. And this mechanical baseball game, it was a bunch of decks, a ball would roll down a ramp.
So is the update of scientific batting practice.
Yeah. And then you were the force behind the bat, and it wasn't working. The mechanism was jamming. So I called the, vice president, and I said, this isn't working. He goes, what's wrong with it? I go, the casting isn't right. He goes, fix it. I go, okay, I'll get it fixed. So they had to mill it out differently to give some clearance. And they fixed it. So that's how I got drawn into being the leader on. A lot of the things within the company was out of necessity. I was put in charge of the slot machine reel mech line because the foreman had a hernia. So it's like, okay, you go. That's the way they were. It's just the way it was. So you never knew what you were going to be doing until you were told. So.
Have a question here?
Ooh, sorry, that's loud. This way. Yeah, Jim, love your work. I got Centaur, Rolling Stones, Mata Hari. What else we got? Blackjack. And I was fortunate to pick up, I wanted to get a regular blackjack, but I found one, an EM, which is pretty rare, 138 made. And I want to get your take on making that a two-player? Why a two-player versus a four-player like the solid-state version? And what kind of was going through your head when you had to design, or wasn't any difference between designing the EM version or the solid-state version of blackjack? How that went for differences for you in designing?
Again, I think it was just the features were such that, multiples of the electromechanical devices just became cost prohibitive. So it was easy to do it electronically. It didn't cost anything.
Slide 17, if you want to bring it up. The one before that.
I mean, a lot of the different, a lot of the direction was just based on cost from management. So what could be, that's why the electronics gave us it was 40 switches, 16 solenoid drivers, and 64 lamps. Go have a nice day, So that was.
There's art differences in those two. Did you have any input on the art differences between the two-player EM and the solid-state?
No, again, that was, the art department was somewhat independent of us. I mean, sometimes they would ask, I think that depending on the artist, certain people, would ask more questions than others, So, or ask for input, I would say. And when, like Paul and I worked on Centaur, he was very interested in what I thought, and I don't know if he would have done that game with anybody else because he knew I would be receptive to the idea. Well, and again, necessity is the mother of invention. I knew what my game was costing. So by having only 3 colors on the playfield, the playfield cost was less because it was so much for each screen on the playfield. So it's like when we talk, I said, done, perfect, I love it.
Plus, black is the cheapest color of ink.
So I mean, it was, with the red accenting, for just to get things pop. And again, I'm very proud of that game with the different translucent inserts and so forth. I think it worked. That game was, just so everybody knows, that game was called Video Classic when I did it as a Whitewood. And the reason it was Video Classic is because I went and looked at all the different video games and what they had for their features. And, one of them was the attract mode. A video game would be playing an arcade all by itself, showing you what the rules were. The game would talk to you, to prompt you, to give you more instructions, to tell you how to play the game once you put your money in. So I went through and I tried to cherry pick what I considered to be the main features, or some of the key features, I should say, in video games that made them appealing. And that's why... is everybody familiar that Centaur has the self-play mode if it isn't played for a certain period of time?
Yes.
Yeah, if Centaur isn't played it's a setting, but if it isn't played for a period of time, it'll just kick out all the balls and start playing itself. So that was to show you that, hey, this is a multi-ball game. Now, in the arcade, people would be going, where'd those balls come from? Because there's no places to capture the balls. So it worked out well.
I think we can do 2 more questions.
Sorry, one more. Did you have any influence on the taunting you? Centaur always taunted you.
I did, yes.
That was you.
I sat with a jug of wine in my lap, in my family room, with the playfield drawing on the floor, coming up with the script and coming up with how I wanted it to sound. Yeah. And the drunker I got, the more I sounded like the game. So it worked out well.
The sacrifices you make.
I know.
You have a question?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've heard the story also. It was funny, just throw this out. Jim can tell you the story later about his babysitter who got scared to death because the game was going into the attract mode in the basement, and she thought somebody
she
was
went
down
downstairs and played the game while we were out. And when we came home, you could see she was terrified. And it was like, what's wrong? There's somebody in the basement. And it's like, what? And they said, did you play Centaur? Yes. Did you turn it off? I don't know. Okay, there's nobody in the basement.
The question I got though for you, Jim, you made it. You said something that triggered me. You said bow and arrow. So
Right.
can you share a little bit about bow and arrow, and also Southland Engineering, and their work to make Bigfoot, which was basically bow and arrow.
It was bow and arrow.
But a gigantic version.
Right.
And did you have any input with Southland Engineering during that
What
time?
what happened is they brought in the game, and management. I mean, a lot of games were brought in, and management made a lot of decisions, some of which maybe weren't the best, because Nolan Bushnell brought Pong into engineering, and management decided they didn't want to make it. So, but anyhow, that game was brought in, and they wanted to see it play. They wanted because the game that was brought in was crude. So yeah, I was assigned that project. I got a 4x10 sheet of plywood and made a drawing table, and basically drew, bow and arrow to scale on that platform. I mean, they already had it done, but this was to make it, accurate. And the flipper coils were 110 volt Dormeyers. So these are big T-bar solenoids. They take your finger off if you weren't careful. We got the because they came in with a cue ball. That was what they used. It was like,
So you scaled up the ball and everything.
well, the thing is, you couldn't scale up the ball, because if you do the math, they would have weighed like 5 pounds.
Yeah.
But so we did a hollow cast, and it was fine. I mean, we got it to. I mean, it was a little different dynamic, because all the weight was on the outside of the ball, so it's like a flywheel.
Yeah.
So you got a lot more rotational force out of it, which was, you got used to that. I mean, plus, this wasn't a real pinball machine. This was a novelty. But, I mean, it played pretty well until you grab the ball and you're like, because, I mean, I don't know if you do, but you're nervous. You bounce the ball on the floor, you catch it. Well, since it was hollow cast, pieces would break off on the inside, and then you had a baby rattle. So it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Completely EM machine.
Yes.
And Dormeyer is the famous Chicago manufacturer of generic solenoids and occasionally home appliances that Harvey Heiss went to when he got out of pinball. So Chicago, it always comes back to manufacturing companies in Chicago.